welcome to a fistful of dice. First off, how about that intro, huh? How awesome is that? That intro was done for me by my good friend Chloe, who runs the RPG channel Bit3 Gamer Gal, and you can find her channel in the link in the description. I think that's awesome. I was very pleased with how awesome that intro was. So, stepping it up here with the animated intro. You gotta play with the big boys. So, this video is going to be a recap of the first two sessions of my Sundered Throne campaign. I'll put both links to both sessions down below, but all told, it's like 7 hours of live gaming, and very few people have time to sit there and watch that, and even fewer people have time to sit there and watch that and absorb it. So this is going to be like a quick, I'm hoping for like 5-minute recap of what happened in the first two sessions, and the purpose of this is I have 2 more parties that are going to be playing in this same campaign, but they're going to be sort of partying simultaneously to the first party. So this is to sort of bring them up to speed on what is happening elsewhere in the kingdom, and it's also just to kind of like set the stage for the next party. So the first party that we had was let's see, we had Moving a Blender, Darren Jones playing Mollerman, who was a half-orc paladin. Basically, he used to be like a thug or a bandit, and then he found the light of Pelor and became a paladin. We had the Boosty Boy, Eric, and he was playing Atticus, who was nothing if not entertaining. Atticus was a rogue who was purely out for himself, purely out for the gold, and if at any point he was helpful, it was to further his own standing. He was a really fun character, but he was basically, you know, your basic backstabby rogue type character. And then we also had Mark Williams playing Caravos, and Caravos was a humble shepherd boy from Northrend, which is the town that they journeyed to. And we had 100 Roach, Sean, playing Theron, who was a half-elf rogue who specialized in thrown weapons, grenade weapons, like acid flasks and alchemist fire and stuff like that. So the campaign started out with basically it's set in the Kingdom of Karn, which I mean I've talked about this before, but just very briefly, the Kingdom of Karn used to be ruled by a lineage of kings, the Grey Kings, and the last of them, Morris Grey, died without a known heir. And before he died, he split the throne in half with his sword, which was a magical famed sword called Lux. And he split the throne in half and said that basically like no one was going to sit on the throne unless they were a rightful heir. And everyone was like, you didn't have any sons, dude. So, but before he died, he gave the sword Lux to his most trusted royal guard, who was a man by the name of Namor Cole. And that'll come into play later. But basically, one of the lords of Karn, who has been warring, trying to basically restore Karn and like unite all of the fiefdoms under his rule, is Lord Bradley Nash the Steel-Handed, and he is the Lord of Ironhall, which is in the north of Karn, but not as far north as Northrend. And his holdings consist of much of the far north of Karn, Northrend included. And he is he's warring in the south with one of the other lords who, and I'm gonna have to check his name here because I can't remember, but so all of his armies and militias are in the south warring with this guy, Hillard Torlin, the Torlins. And the Torlins they're another one of the higher up lords. There's 12 lords total, but truthfully, after 40 years of war, there's only like 2 or 3 that are still sort of going at it. And the Torlins are one of them. And Hillard Torlin is a younger lord. His father was actually killed on the battlefield by Lord Nash, so they got some beef, and they've been warring for a couple of years now, pretty consistently. So Nash is pretty occupied in the south, but what happens is Northrend, which is one of his holdings and a very important town because it is sort of the last line of defense against the far north, because there's a bunch of orcs that live over the mountains. There's this mountain range called the Anvils. And Northrend is sort of like the first sort of warning post against sort of orc raids. So it's an important holding. So he put out a call for adventurers, and that's what the audition videos were. And he picked Malerman, Caravos, Theron, and Atticus to go to Northrend. And he met with them in his meeting room, and he basically told them, you know, Northrend's really important. I don't have the manpower or the time to go up there and deal with it, but, you know, I'm willing to leverage some mercenary forces, paying you really well. I just need you to go up there, take care of the problem, come back. I'll pay you a little bit now, a little bit later. So they're like, okay. And while they're there meeting with him, they run into this elf guy, who, he doesn't say his name or anything, but he kind of creeps him out because he just kind of stares at him. And he basically says, like, you know, you are the first pieces on the board to move, but you're not my responsibility. You're just like, okay. And he goes off. And they later learn that this guy's name is Salra's Stormgaze, and he'll be involved in the other parties, undoubtedly. So Bradley Nash gives him this quest, but he holds Atticus back, and he says to Atticus, you know, I'm pretty sure, you know, you're kind of a discreet, subtle individual, and you know when to be discreet about things. And Atticus is like, well, you know, yeah. And Bradley Nash says, well, here's the deal. There's a rumor that there's, you know, the Sword of Kings, the Thronebreaker, Lux. There's a rumor that it's up there in Northrend. If you bring it to me, I'm going to pay you a lot of gold. And Atticus is like, okay, I like the sound of this. And Malerman and Theron overhear this, so they're sort of aware that Atticus is sort of on this separate mission. But so they leave and they head up to Northrend, and they make camp the first night. And while they're making camp, they meet up with this young boy who's recently escaped from Northrend, and he's injured, and his name was Drem. And they take him in, and they ask him some questions, and basically what it amounted to was that the town's besieged by undead. Every night they attack, and he and his brother tried to escape, and they were actually attacked outside of town as they were trying to leave, and his brother's, like, dead and gone. He doesn't know that for sure, but his brother was taken by the undead, so he's either a zombie or a zombie chow. So they give Drem food and stuff, and then they take him with them to Northrend. So they keep journeying the next day, and they get to this forest, which is, you know, on the west side of the road, and it's called Bleakwood. And Caravos, he shepherds sheep from Iron Hall to Northrend and back all the time, and he knows that cutting through Bleakwood shaves like 6 hours off of the time. So you take off the road and go through Bleakwood, and everyone's like, oh, that sounds good. So they go through Bleakwood, and Caravos knows that Bleakwood is sort of like a hideout sometimes for orc raiding parties that come down through the Anvils, but he's never encountered any orcs. But while they're going, they notice that there's an abandoned camp kind of off the side of the trail. So they go check it out, and it looks like an abandoned orc camp, and it looks like, you know, there was kind of a battle there a little bit, but it looks like it was like hastily abandoned. And there's weapons kind of strewn about, and they find some weapons that look like guard weapons of Northrend. So either there were guards there from Northrend, or somebody was there using guard weapons from Northrend. So, but they're sort of like, oh, that's weird. And they continue, and they come out of Bleakwood, and sure enough, there's Northrend. And at first, they get fired upon by the guards, because the guards are just super jumpy. You know, they've been fighting undead for like 2 weeks and probably haven't been sleeping well. But they announce themselves and say, you know, I just threw something. Say, you know, Lord Nash sent us, and we're here to help. And they're met by Namor Cole, who I mentioned earlier. He's the guardian of the sword and the elder in Northrend. So he greets them, and he basically says, you know, I sent messenger birds to Lord Nash, and I did not expect him to help. Honestly, like, that I did not expect it, but I'm happy that you're here. And he sort of explains the situation, you know, ended up been attacking for about 2 weeks. They come up out of the ground, attack at night, and then as soon as the sun comes up, they leave. And him and the local priest of Pelor, a guy by the name of Brother Joseph, believe that they're after the sword. Just sort of their behavior and the way they're acting, it's very not normal for undead. They clearly have a focus and a purpose. Both of them sort of think they're being led or directed by something. So, and with that in mind, they show the PCs the sword, and the sword is just, you know, it's this really, really nice enchanted sword. I think it's like a +2 longsword, and probably the nicest looking sword any of them has ever seen. And they say, you know, this is Lux, this is Blade of Kings, the Thronebreaker. You know, this was the sword of King Morris Grey. He gave it to me before he died. I've been watching it ever since for 40 years. I've been guarding this sword. And so the PCs set up in the Temple of Pelor with Brother Joseph, and they set up sort of defenses, and they're going to defend the sword against the undead that night. So undead come up out of the ground and attack, and there's lots of different undead. There's skeletons and zombies, but there's also like undead orcs. So clearly there's some different stuff going on here, and the undead are just, you know, tenacious. They're trying to attack, and the PCs manage to hold them off quite handily without too much trouble. But Namor Cole shows up after the battle, and he's like, oh, they took the sword. And the PCs are like, oh, the sword's right here. We protected it. And Namor Cole's like, that's a decoy. The actual sword was on me. Like, I had the sword, and they took it from me. So PCs were kind of pissed about that because Namor had deceived them, but he was just trying to do that to protect the sword. Because in his mind, the sword is more important than any person to him. It's, you know, his last order from his king that he served. So, and he's been protecting this sword for 40 years. So, so he tells the PCs, you know, the undead probably took it into the Crypt of Kings. You're gonna have to go down there and recover it. So the PCs are like, all right, crap, we'll go down there. So the PCs immediately head down into the Crypt of Kings, which the Crypt of Kings is like, basically it's where they bury all the Grey Kings. And normally it's a place of like respect and mourning. You know, people regularly go down there to pay their respects to the old kings, ask for blessings from their ancestors and things like that. So it's a good place. It's a revered place. It's not like a scary place, but the undead have like set up shop in here. So they get down there, and oh, by the way, Namor mentions that some guards went down into the crypt to try and figure out what was going on, and they never came back up. And it's been a few days, so they go down there, and immediately they come across one of the guards' bodies. And he's just completely desiccated. He looks like he's been drained of all of his fluids. He's just he looks deader than he should. He looks like he's like 2 months dead, even though he's, you know, only been down there for a few days. And they find that his weapons have been taken, and he's clutching something. And they take it, and it's like a piece of a slab, like a stone slab, like it's broken off. And it has part of a poem on it. And the poem is telling the history of the kings of Karn. And they surmise that this is one piece, and then there's going to be other pieces that finish the poem. So they keep moving through the crypt, and they come upon the lair of an undead spider. And they ended up fighting that, and that was something they'd never really seen before. So obviously whatever force is directing these undead is getting creative, because it's making undead orcs, undead spiders. It's just like bolstering its ranks with these horrible undead abominations. But they find another slab, another part of the poem. So, and it you know, tells more about the history of the kings of Karn. They keep going in the crypt, and they come upon another guard, who he looks a lot like the one that they found in the entryway, just completely desiccated, you know, skin's all leathery, pulled taut across his bones, and he's hanging on the wall from chains, you know, like this. And they approach him, and he wakes up. He's like, you know, and think like, you know, if you've seen Seven, the sloth murder with the guy that was kept alive in the room with like, I can't even remember, but basically it's like, the guy looked like a corpse, but he was still alive. That's basically what was going on here. And they're able to ask him questions, and he tells them that he went down there, and somebody named Creel is leading these undead, and Creel did this to him. And we didn't say this outright, but what happens is he turned this guy half undead. Basically, this guy's body is rotting away, but his soul is still in there, and he still has his mental faculty. So he is a imagine if you were living inside of a corpse. That's what's happening to this guy. It's just horrible. And so Malerman, the half-orc paladin, does the merciful thing and lays on hands, which does damage to undead. It poofs this guy. He dies. So Malerman puts him out of his misery. You know, very, very paladin-y thing to do. And the group keeps going. They avoid some traps, and they find the final piece of the stone slab, which basically tells them that the way down is through the charitable king. So they read through the poem, they find out which king sounds the most charitable, which is pretty obvious. And they go into the area with all the king's tombs. They open up, I think it was King Marcus was the charitable one. They open up his coffin, no body inside, but there's a secret door in the back that slides open. So they go down. They go down there, and there is a man, what they can surmise is a human man, in brown robes, chanting over the actual Lux, the sword. And he turns around and looks at him, and he's kind of all covered up. You know, he's got gloves and stuff on, and he's wearing a steel mask. If anyone's on the Fistful of Dice Facebook, you've seen the picture of this guy. He's wearing a steel mask that has like a hole for his mouth and a hole for his eyes. And you know, he kind of talks all muffled like this. Think Bade from Dark Knight. You know, like kind of like that. And he's attempting to do magic on this sword, and they don't know what, but they stop him. They do battle. He summons a bunch of skeletons, and they get away with the sword. And he gets pretty injured because he's fighting Kervos, and he gets pretty injured, and he's kind of backed up against the wall. And he teleports away, but before he teleports away, he says, you have no idea what you've done. Like, you have messed up everything. But he's like, oh, okay. He teleports away. Atticus has the sword, Lux. He takes off and heads back to Ironhall to get his payment from Lord Nash. The others head up, and they tell Namor, you know, undead are gone, but the sword was taken by Atticus. And Namor is like, well, we got to go to Ironhall. So at the end of the session, Atticus, the rogue, human rogue, is running off to Ironhall with Lux, the sword. He's trying to bring it to Nash. And then Namor Cole is with Malerman, Kervos, and Theron, and they are also heading back to Ironhall. Now, a couple of important things to note. The PCs learned through investigation in these sessions that there may potentially be an unknown heir to the Grey Line. And Namor firmly believes this and believes that he is waiting to give the sword to the rightful heir. So that's important to note. The other important things to note is that Creel, this guy with the mask on, was attempting to teleport the sword away. Where he was attempting to teleport it away to, the PCs don't know, but he went somewhere. He teleported himself away. So he is still alive and still somewhere, potentially in Karn. And the other thing to note is that the elf guy from the beginning of the sessions, Salra's Stormgaze, was going off to speak to the other parties. So those are some important things to note. But this ran a lot longer than I wanted it to, but it's still more succinct than 7 hours. So I hope this was a adequate recap to anyone who was not able to watch it. Again, the links to the sessions are down below. I thought they were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed them. They were my first online games that I've ever run, so you know, there were some iffy parts, and I'm still getting used to running a party online. I'm very, very much used to the tabletop, but I'm getting better at it, and I think I'm only going to get better at it, and I think the adventures are only going to improve. So really looking forward to playing with the next party, and I'll have dates for that pretty soon. I'm starting a new job shortly, so my schedule's really up in the air, but we're going to make it happen, and we're going to make it happen soon. So yeah, thanks to everybody for watching. And thank you again, everybody from Party 1. I had a great time, and I hope you did too. So anyway, that's going to be it from me, guys. Take care, and happy gaming all.